Let's start. Welcome everybody to our fourth Gizmos and Gadget 2020 event with the subtitle of Sensors at the Edge of the IoT for today's COVID pandemic. Me, Peter Walter, I'm the president of the Wireless Communication Alliance. And normally, since 3 years, we have Oktoberfest on site with beer and pretzel and music. Today we have Oktoberfest at home. With this, whoever has a beer in hand, so I try to show my one.
Cheers. Cheers, cheers.
And I put it in and say, cheers for everybody. Yeah, we do this at the end also. So if you have a time, go to your refrigerator and drink some beer. And also be prepared, have some pretzels. With this in mind, unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to one of our oldest or youngest member, Gregory Desprezé. He is one of the founding fathers of the Wireless Communication Alliance, passed away way too early. Like I said, Greg started very well in the early stages in the late 1990s. We are in business since 1994. We come in the next slide to it. When he joined the board of this Wireless Communication Alliance. In September 2000, Greg had a 1-hour presentation of the beauty and the basics of OFDMA, which is used for LTE and upcoming technologies, where he reached the first time 100 attendees, which is a record for long years. We had barely reached 100 people in the presentation. He has a really kind of nice sense of humor, kindness, and generosity. He was also pro bono and site survey of the San Francisco Opera facilities. He's 10 years plus as a Santa Clara Science and Engineering Fair judge, and many other years taking high quality pictures for sporting events and other events at his son's schools, and also doing the WCA events in the last years. Following this, funny guy, always prepared for a joke. His common slogan was pizza in the back and beer in the front. And he would be one of the first who would also put a toast again on himself and on the WCA. Let's start with this event dedicated to Greg, but life has gone, right? So let's talk a little bit who we are. Wireless Communication Alliance, founded in 1994. The Wireless Communication Alliance, you see something, WCA, is a non-profit business league dedicated to providing education, awareness, connection, communication, community to the wireless industry. So since 1994, as you've spoken, we bring the wireless technology into Silicon Valley, and with Zoom, these are the good things of COVID. We do this now nationwide and worldwide. We have guests from Japan, from China, Singapore. I come later to this also. This is our board. Without the help of these members, we cannot make it. So you see me, Peter Walter, as president, Jeremy Toll as vice president, Tom Hunt, our treasurer. He is also the moderator for this event. Tom will be appreciated and take all the credit cards and the checks from you. Tom Mitchell is our secretary. I hope he joined also. He's a very busy man, like Jeff Jen is director. Tom Rao is director since a few months. Our admin, Christine Couture, makes everything available on the presentation point of view and on live events. She is responsible for all the good food and snacks and drinks. And Amar Musavi, last but not least, is our marketing communication guy who is making the nice movie clips, what you see on LinkedIn and other social media. So here, thanks to our sponsors, we could not make it without you, just to mention some of those. Like Aspil, CIG, Google, Vola, SensorWorks, just a few to mention. A little bit housekeeping is important. So please use the Zoom comment section for questions. The presentation recordings, so this event will be recorded, will be available on our website and on also YouTube on other social medias in 48 hours. But like I said at the beginning, greetings to the world and thanks for being our guests. So the world would be, of course, nationwide, USA, East Coast, West Coast. I saw that some people from even France and Germany are joining. Good night, it's 1 o'clock on your time. But also Japan, Singapore. So really the East Coast of the world is joining as well. Thank you so much to being our friend and our guest and with us. And like always, as of today, in the future, entertainment brought to you by the Midnight Ramblers. You will hear them at the end a little bit more. You can book them anytime. I heard from Andy. Andy is one of the group members. We are working for food. So probably not really, but yeah.
Great musicians.
And here we are, like Andy said also, keep distance. They are playing Come Together with 6 feet apart, 2 meters for the rest of the world. It's very important to do so. Upcoming events, a little bit spoiler alert. So currently we are talking about the IoT Gizmos and Gadget, which comes again next year, inshallah, so hopefully. We have next month, October, the next IoT revolution. So we are talking about battery charging, wireless charging. Is there a world without batteries? Very exciting. Then our flagship event, which we have now since 21 years. What's hot, what's not, where a venture capitalist, M&A specialist will talk whether it makes sense to invest in IoT, industrial IoT actually. We are not talking about garage door opener and such. So we'll see, yes or no, does it make sense to invest in this kind of market segment? And then another Spectrum event in 2021. This is our third one where people talk about 5G, CBRS, and what's happening next. We are working also on a Christmas party at home in December. We will see how that will work. We're working on a very high-titled surprise guest. Probably it will be something like the history of the wireless market segment. Thank you very much to IoT Nation, which is our partner, event partner on the East Coast, located in New York. They have a tool platform to explore the IoT universe with this code WCA 300. If you punch in this code at iotnation.com, you get access for a week, probably for two, to all the 25,000 companies in their IoT ecosystems. They have correlations, nice spider-web diagram, and Excel sheets we can download if you're into it. Makes sense to predict the world and the market. With this, thank you much. Thank you very much again. I think I hand over to the moderator, Tom Hunt. Are you ready to join?
I'm here, Peter. Thank you. And welcome everyone to the virtual Gizmos and Gadgets. Back in the non-COVID days when people used to meet in person, we would showcase solutions and our attendees could interact with all the products and gadgets that we had live. And of course, given that this event takes place at the beginning, near the beginning of October, we also celebrate Oktoberfest, as Peter said, with a fair amount of beer. Today we'll do that virtually. I think you'll see today we have an interesting event in store for you. We're talking sensors. And while they've been important and deployed in the past, the post-COVID world will see many new use cases for sensors, from contact tracing to essential employee health to crop safety. There will be more data at the edge of the network and many wireless technology used to transport that data to where it needs to be. Our panelists today are from SensorWorks and Vinduino and Teltelic. So enjoy the event. And as Peter mentioned, use the chat screen for your questions. I'll be monitoring them there. And we'll ask our speakers once they finish speaking those questions. And again, we'll recap at the end of the event any questions you may have. So first up, let me introduce Andy Doe. In addition to being our DJ and the provider of our music, he is also the founder and president of EmbeddedWorks, a wireless technology integrator. He has over 20 years experience in RF and wireless communications and has launched several IoT brands focused on GPS, telematics, and wireless sensors. One of those is SensorWorks, which we'll be talking about today, an IoT solution provider that offers ready-made sensors that are cloud connected and utilize mixed wireless technologies. So without further ado, Andy, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and pleasure to be here, and happy Oktoberfest. So cheers for those who have a beer in hand or a drink in hand. And thank you for the WCA for hosting this event. So yes, SensorWorks, our company is dedicated to kind of bridging the physical world to the cloud, which is all kind of the rage these days. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in essence, our motto is, we believe that no company should be left behind in the IoT revolution. And that comes, of course, with the ability to measure and monitor and hopefully monetize the sensors that exist today. And we think it's very relevant now that the social distance, wave is here. It's the new norm. And there's a lot of technologies that I think sensors play into that. And my esteemed colleagues will also go over some of the things in their realm. Next slide, please. So what is the IoT puzzle? IoT is the buzzword of our decade or decades. And, even though it's 3 simple letters, it's actually very complex, right? And IoT depends on what you're doing, typically has kind of a pyramid or 3 pillars that to make all it work, everything work. You got the device, the sensor, you've got the wireless and the platform. And in essence, at the end of the day with the device, what is it measuring? What is it sensing in terms of wireless, which is the transport of choice? What type of wireless? We can go into the different types. And so ultimately you're trying to figure out how do I, gather that sensor and where does it go to? And then ultimately a platform. What cloud provider and are you going to build it or buy it kind of concept. So I always joke that, IoT is more than just a concept. It's basically an announcement that you want to really own the solution. So I own this, or IoT, however you want to look at it, is really where we try to bring to the market in SensorWorks is we want you to kind of be in control of the IoT solution, especially when it comes to sensors. Next slide. So considerations, as I mentioned, in the physical world with sensors, there really isn't a standard, right? There's different discrete sensors and so forth. So someone has to do that lifting, and it would be nice if everything was a standard in some ways, just like what we've seen the success of wireless standards. But in sensor world, it hasn't really gotten there yet. So in doing so, we have to depend on the physical world of things that are common and making that ingested into a platform. So standard things, temperature, humidity, light, lots and lots of things. And there are some wonderful tools and partners that we work with that allow us to ingest the physical world into the digital world. So this digital transformation kind of starts with that. And in the transport method, there are a lot of I would say complementary, some competing standards, depending how you look at it, in terms of what that transport is. Is it going to be cellular? Is it Cat-M? Is it NB? Is it LoRa? Is it Sigfox? And, it's different strokes for different folks, and there isn't one perfect standard to do it. And you kind of have to take into context, what are you trying to monitor and measure? And these days, as the carriers are starting to see the benefits of sensors, since the cell phone market and the tablets are all pretty much saturated, they're just kind of stealing business from each other. It's really about sensors. That's the real promise of the 5 billion sensors. And what we've been hearing is there are folks out there offering a 10-year data plan if you're doing something in the minutia level. And lastly, platform, pick your poison. Is it going to be Azure? Is it going to be AWS, whatnot? And so I would say more and more computing is in the cloud, as we all know, but the cloud now has become, is that cloud secure? Is it flexible? Is it reliable to allow me to do my sensor thing that needs to report in, 1,000 times a day? Next slide. And as it relates to COVID tech solutions, some of the things that they're hot right now in our industry, at least we're seeing, are things like thermal screening. So you've probably been to your nearest hardware store or whatnot, and there's probably someone at the door scanning your forehead and measuring to make sure that you are safe and enter the store. And that's a person. And of course, there are technologies out there in which we have a kiosk that allows you to measure, and then that allows you to kind of get an instant warning without the need to have a greeter. So things of like contact tracing, which our friends from Tectonic will mention later, that's becoming very important. You'll see, at least the other day, I was watching sports, and the NFL and the NBA both have contact tracing devices in their bubble, and they need to make sure that everybody's safe. And if someone gets infected, they need to rewind the clock for that. People presence counting, occupancy, remote monitoring is huge right now. There's so many kids that are learning at home. Some even don't have internet. And our mayor here in Silicon Valley for San Jose wrote a report a couple of months ago that there's 15,000 school kids in Silicon Valley that do not have internet, which is astonishing to me. But it's true, and that this is just an idea of what our society is going through with COVID. Next slide. So one of the devices that kind of brings all this together that we're quite proud of at SensorWorks is we have a device that allows for worker safety. And an unfortunate situation prompted some legislation, but unfortunately 2 years ago, there was a maid that was assaulted in New Jersey, US, and that prompted legislation to make sure that all hotel workers are safe. And of course, panic buttons and things have always been around, but what we try to do is to bring the cloud aspect to it. And so this device has 4G two-way voice. So essentially it's a mini cell phone. It has BLE, so we put little beacons throughout the hotel, so the worker can press a button and we know down to the room exactly where they're at. And if they happen to leave the facility, there's GPS. So there's an indoor-outdoor play. And we're seeing a lot of demand for these type of sensor or location, because technically location is a sensor. It happens to be, a GPS sensor of sorts. Next slide. Asset monitoring, probably the easiest GPS or easiest IoT thing to work on or sell. And our company, we provide data connectivity. So we, basically buy SIM card data plans and wholesale, chop it up in little bits and pieces. And a majority of those activations and connectivity is centered around location. Where's my stuff? Whether it's moving or not, and so forth. So there's a lot of industries that you can see here, from fleet to toolboxes to all sorts of location systems. So still, I would say that tracking is still probably the most popular sensor application right now. But we see that changing as kind of the COVID tech starts to materialize. Next slide. And smart city, smart building, there's too many to list, but one of the ones that I thought was kind of up and coming and starting to be implemented is the waste bin monitoring. So imagine the cost savings to send someone to empty the garbage. And you have to do that even when it's empty. That's not very efficient. So what if you only did that when it was full or mostly full? So, Tom had asked me for an example earlier, and I had the pleasure of going to one of the smartest smart cities in Europe, a beautiful city called Santander, Spain, beach city, and had the pleasure of meeting some of their government folks. And in 2014, they had 12,000 sensors in their city, and everything from street lights to so forth. And in regards to waste bin or trash management, they had a savings of 20% of, just whether it be fuel or maintenance, just by putting sensors in the waste bin as, it circulates the city. So cities are recognizing and putting budgets into smart city, and especially in the US, where there's a lot of the federal funding for the COVID CARES money, some of this is being used to build a safer, smarter city. Next slide. So that's it for SensorWorks. Some of the solutions, and we practice what we preach. So, and also musically, I'm in this band here, and we also try to be safe and 6 feet away, and it's quite fun actually for everyone to be doing this. So I welcome any questions or down the road. So thank you guys.
Andy, thank you. One of the things I've noticed is many times when we talk about sensors, we talk about a whole range of wireless solutions, Bluetooth and LoRa and Sigfox and Cat-M, and people start talking 5G and where that fits. Can you talk about why a certain wireless technology might be used and what are the implications for deployment?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there is different strokes for different folks. There's no perfect wireless standard. And what I would encourage is take a look at what you're trying to connect to. So if your goal is to connect to one of these smartphones, then there's really only 3 or 4 ways to connect to it, right? There's cellular, there's Wi-Fi, there's Bluetooth, and maybe there's NFC. So that kind of limits your choices of what you're trying to connect to. Now, if you are doing your own, network, then the choices, get a little bit more broad. But at the end of the day, what's the ecosystem? What type of devices, whether it's consumer facing or B2B, are you trying to connect to and resolve or pick a technology standard around the devices, the ecosystem that you're trying to connect.
Okay, thanks, Andy. We talk a lot about sensors, and you've talked about a range of applications. You hear about smart sensors and dumb sensors. What's the difference?
Well, to me, a smart sensor has some sort of ability to network and get back to a cloud, right? So, and not to belittle, all the sensors, because there's so many. But if a sensor is more doing just on-off, that's not so intelligent. But if a sensor is measuring like smoke detection or something like that, and then of course being able to then pass that through IP, then that's a little bit smarter. So everything at SensorWorks, we try to look at sensors that have that IP hook, that ability to network, and then of course being able to monitor in the cloud. As I mentioned earlier, if we can measure it, we can monitor it, and we can monitor it, you either make money or save money, and that's kind of the business model that we look at.
Great. We have a question from the audience regarding wireless again, playing on the wireless side. What do you think are the most popular wireless technologies being used?
Well, that's a loaded question. Most popular, hands down, Wi-Fi. Everybody got it. Everybody has it. Everybody loves it. It's used everywhere, but it's not so great maybe for some of the sensor applications that my colleagues will be telling you about later. So because it doesn't have built in some of the power savings. It's not meant to sit in a field for years. It's great for surfing the internet, but if you're a parking meter or you're some sort of device alarm, you don't need to surf the internet. So again, look at the pros and cons of what you're trying to do. It is ubiquitous, like Bluetooth is ubiquitous, but it also has its place.
Thanks, Andy. Another one from the crowd. In the use case of sending heavy chunks of data from various data points spread across the agricultural field, what are the other options other than LoRa?
I'm going to mention a little bit because I think Rainier from Venduino is a little bit more of an expert on that. But there are technologies that allow you to connect, but at the end of the day, how far? If you're talking about ag, there are only certain technologies that can span multi-mile, and I think LoRa is an excellent technology. Cellular, of course, is great, but it's a power hog, and the carrier may not put a tower in your neck of the woods. So there's a lot of trade-off, but I'm sure Rainier from Venduino can address that later on what and why LoRa has been, I guess, his weapon of choice.
Okay, and then one more, and then we'll move on. What do you do to manage the diversity of sensor types that you just described?
Well, if you have a mixed technology deployment where you have a Bluetooth this, a LoRa that, a Sigfox this, and ultimately, if it resolves back to IP and you can ingest it from that point, it's a level playing field. You could do whatever you want. But if you have to, have unique sensors where you can't ingest it into IP, then it becomes a little bit harder and things could fail out in the field. Because the whole point is, how do I reach out, over the internet, how to reach out to the field without sending a service person or a technician out? And I would say that's something you should think about.
Okay, great. So we'll have some more questions, Andy. That was a great talk. We're going to move on to our second speaker now. Rainer van der Veer, speaking of which. Rainer is an ag tech entrepreneur and a wine grower in Temecula. He's currently the CEO and founder of Vinduino. Vinduino builds the future of agriculture technology with award-winning technology that improves profitability by lowering water and labor costs, increasing yield, and improving fruit quality. So without further ado, Rainer, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon or evening or good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this event. Again, my name is Rainer van der Veer. Let's go to the next slide, please. So my company helps farmers with IoT solutions that optimize their crop and minimize or reduce their use of resources. So one of the things we think are important, and this is also because we farm ourselves, so we know what is keeping us awake, and by talking and communicating with colleague farmers, we get an understanding of what they think are the main issues. Having access to essential workers is important, and as the topic of this talk is about the impact of COVID and what IoT can do, having workers work in a safe environment that is monitored to make sure that they are kept safe is important. We also talk about other things. It's not just COVID that keeps farmers awake. When you think about the situation in California, where the amount of groundwater is limited and will be limited by the government, so available water to grow your crops and food actually is a very important issue. Farmers get paid by the crop that they grow, so the yield is a direct indirect relationship with their income. And crop can be destroyed by pests, so pest management is something that we look into. How do you irrigate optimally for the best fruit quality? And of course, if you look at the longer time frame, how do you mitigate climate change? We also have a lot of reporting to the government, like how much nutrients did you use, how much pesticides did you spray. So reporting is also something that automation or integration of cloud-based applications can help with to save time. Next slide, please. So what we are trying to do is a three-layer of things. We want to make the farmer aware of how much and how often he needs to irrigate for the best crop results. Also, we can measure temperature and weather data and have profiles that can predict when an insect could start becoming a nuisance. So you can reduce the amount of spraying while you still get the effect of suppressing the pest sufficiently. Rather than just irrigate at a fixed frequency with a fixed amount, we can regulate the amount of water based on the daily weather and the soil profile. So we have a lot of data that goes into a model that just doesn't present the gauges or the charts of the individual sensors, but all get compiled into an advice for the farmer how much and how often to irrigate or when to spray for a certain pest. So that is a level deeper than just showing the data from the sensors. Now, going back to what Andy was telling about the device and then the wireless connection and then going to the platform, we have added an additional layer. So once you have your measurement and you have the data on your platform so you can see what's going on, now what do you do with it? And especially in the sense of irrigation, if you know how much and how often you want to irrigate, now you can also automate your valve control using the same network that you use for the sensors. So we can basically measure what's going on in the field, and then we can also act on it by operating actuators that open and close valves. We also have added additional precision by measuring how much water is going into a field. That also gets reported back to the cloud application, and that will compensate for flow inaccuracies. So if you want to add or if you want to irrigate, say, 5,000 gallons of water in a field, then with the volumetric measurement, you can actually get the feedback about how much gallons actually went into that field. And you can also check the flow rate. So if the flow rate is way too high, you know you have a major leak and you need to shut down your irrigation and send somebody out there. Next slide, please. So we've been working as a company for 3 years. We have been in, say, radio silent mode for 2 years. This is showing kind of the development of our solution. The first generation was a handheld sensor reader, and the sensors were buried in the ground. You needed to walk around, connect the wires, and then you could take a reading of the soil moisture. So that took a lot of labor getting into the field in order to get the data that you wanted. The next generation, and that's also going back to what the question was on from one of the attendees to Andy. We started with using Wi-Fi, and we found that although we could solve the power problem, we could not solve the range. Especially in agricultural settings, you need to have miles of range, and with Wi-Fi we could barely get into the vineyard, to the edge of the vineyard. We could not measure at the points where we really wanted to. So Wi-Fi was not a good technology to get the range and to reach the locations where we actually wanted to have the measurements done. So in the third generation, we added LoRa in the initial phase, and later we added LoRaWAN. When we use LoRa and with our own proprietary protocol, we run into certain issues that were already solved in LoRaWAN, which is a standardization layer on top of the LoRa radio technology. So by using LoRaWAN, we had collision control, and we also have encrypted data communication, which was important for the next generation of products that we were developing. For sensors and temperature, soil moisture sensors and temperature, having encrypted data is not so very important. If somebody reads your temperature data, it's not a big deal. But if somebody should start messing with your irrigation valves, yeah, that's a totally different kind of problem. So that's why we're happy that LoRaWAN has encrypted data that will keep the bad guys out. When we're talking about the fourth generation, so we have a new generation of sensor station. Actually, what we do is we optimize the power consumption of our units in such a way that it can operate for years and years in the field with a very low maintenance rate. It works on solar power, and it has a little solar panel inside that charges a battery. So overnight it will keep running as well. The volumetric feedback with the water meter feedback that I just mentioned in the previous slide was added last year. And that got us some rewards from the American Farm Bureau and also the World Ag Expo, which is the world's largest farm trade show. Made us a top 10 new product last year. And lastly, This year we added also valve control. So with this technology, we can operate pumps and valves in synchronicity, which is important. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about COVID and what we can do, of course, essential workers are not protected when they are working in the fields. And one of the big hazards for field workers in agriculture is heat illness. So depending on the heat index, which is a function of temperature plus the relative humidity, which is different than just the temperature, by the way. So the heat index is really how your body responds to the combination of temperature plus relative humidity. And that could mean that although temperature could be lower with high humidity, you have a higher chance of heat-related illness. So with this integration, we can look at the actual exposure to the heat index of your employees in the field. And the reason why we wanted to do this is we found that we call different microclimates in vineyards, we call that terroir. For example, if I take my own example, the Temecula Valley wine area has a lot of vineyards that are at 1,200 feet elevation. Our vineyard, for example, is at 1,800 feet. So you cannot just say for Temecula there is an overall heat index that is valid for everybody. Our vineyard is much cooler than the vineyards down below. So a worker could work for longer or in a different schedule. So that is the reason why we think that local on-site measurement of the heat index is important. Our technology allows to relay that data to the cloud-based application, and it can be recorded for reference. So with that, I'd like to give the presentation back to the organization, and I'm open for questions.
Rainer, that was very, very interesting. I really get how your technology is used in agriculture, but I started thinking while you were talking, and you know, we talk about how to use this in COVID, and Andy mentioned contact tracing, and you're mentioning protecting farm workers in the field. I'm sure we could talk about workers in general, and we'll talk about that soon. But here we have a pandemic going on, but we also face this time of climate change. And it seems to me that this technology might fit, given the range you have with some of your sensors. How might this be used to help control the spread of wildfires or contain wildfires?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think wildfires have to do with forest management and of course climate change. So it's a combination of both. If you would have sensors in the forest, or at least in the wild areas, you could predict the level of dryness. So weather data is important. As you probably know, the risk of wildfires is higher when there's strong winds and when there's a low relative humidity in combination with high temperatures. So that is something that we can reliably measure. And then understanding how much water is in the soil of the affected areas or the areas at risk will also help understand the dryness of the potential wood that feeds the fires. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do, and you can also think about devices that are out in the field or in the parks that will early detect fires.
Well, thank you, Rainer. We have a question from the audience. The bandwidth provided by LoRa is quite tight. How can I tackle this problem? My aim is to send multi-parameter data from the middle of the field to the base station. I have better flexibility with power, planning to work with 902 to 928 megahertz frequency range. Can normal radio wireless modems be a good option?
Yeah, it is also very situational dependent. Again, how much data are you sending? We had a customer who wants to transmit data from 17 sensors every minute, and with LoRa there was no limitation for doing that. So yeah, you can use one of the networks that is used by the public, like the Things network. And then you'll be limited in the amount of data that you can use. If you set up your own LoRa server or service, you basically decide, how much and how often your nodes can transmit. So that would be one way of approaching it. And if the amount of data exceeds that, then there will be other technologies. But then I need to know a little bit more about, how much data and how often to come up with a good answer.
Gotcha. So we'll have that person reach out directly to get more clarification. But just in general, how much data can you send over LoRa?
Typically, we send 22 bytes every 15 minutes. And that would allow 1,000 stations within the same range of the same gateway to operate without interfering with each other.
And do you deploy any compression technology, what compression or anything else to kind of get you down to that 22 byte format?
No, because if you think about temperature, for example, if you would want to send temperature with a 1 degree Fahrenheit resolution, you could send 0 to 255 within 1 byte. So it's not that you need a lot of bytes in order to get sensor data across. Same for soil moisture. We typically send soil moisture as 0 to 100%. So you can do that in half a byte if you want to.
Great. Well, thank you, Rainier, and anybody who wants to catch up afterward, there will be more time for questions. But right now, I'd like to introduce our third panelist. Barney Barnowski leads the business development team at Tektelic. Tektelic is a premier supplier of IoT infrastructure, including LoRaWAN gateways and many unique IoT end devices. With the emergence of COVID-19, Tektelic has introduced IoT devices that help organizations with continuous monitoring of symptoms, as well as devices geared toward the enforcement of social distancing rules. Today, Barney will provide a quick overview of what Tektelic is doing to help organizations large and small to safely mitigate the current pandemic. So without further ado, Barney, it's all yours.
Am I unmuted now? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us here this evening or morning, however the case may be. Before I get into my official charts, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the key topics that both Andy and Rainier were talking about. And it's really the idea of IoT itself, right? And really the things in IoT. And I'll get to the sort of thing that Rainer was talking about with respect to temperature in a moment, but we started building at Tektelic a number of different IoT solutions a few years back. We're probably best known in North America for the development of gateways, so we have little indoor gateways, we have carrier grade gateways that people can deploy on towers. We work with the larger service providers of LoRa in North America as well as Europe. So guys like Senet, MachineQ, they all use our gateways. But a few years ago, we started developing end devices. So we started developing the things in the IoT of things. And one of the first devices that we built is this little guy here. If you guys can see me on camera, it's this little square box. And we call this our smart room sensor. What it is, it's a little device that has 11 different functions. I'm not gonna dwell on what those functions are. Some of them are things like, motion detection, light detection. You can do leak detection. It has accelerometers in it. But it also has temperature and humidity. And out of all those functions, and we ship this device in the thousands, out of all those functions, the most popular IoT use case for us so far has been temperature, right? Monitoring the remote temperature. And that's what we're starting to realize. And we've now have temperature in all kinds of different things, right? And Rainer will tell you that one of the things he measures as part of his solution is temperature. And this kind of gets us into the whole discussion around COVID, right? Back in March, when we all panicked, and we did panic, I think, our boss, the president of Tiktaalik, happens to be married to a medical doctor. And they had a conversation over dinner as everyone was running out and buying toilet paper, which was very simple. It was along the lines of, how could one detect influenza/COVID-like symptoms without all of the expensive machinery that you would need at a health center, at a medical center, right? And obviously the number one thing we all now know, because we all measure it, is temperature, right? In addition to temperature, however, she also suggested that in addition to temperature, heart rate, and obviously the breathing rate, specifically the breathing rate of a suspected individual, right? Because if you have COVID is an influenza-like condition, breathing becomes difficult, breathing becomes labored. And how do you measure breathing without an expensive piece of equipment, right? Typically you get the little tab thing, they measure your oxygen input. We wanted something much simpler than that, something that we could deploy for a very low cost. And with that, I'm gonna ask you to move to my next chart. So building on the temperature use case and some of our existing devices, we came up with the notion of a respiratory sensor. So essentially this is a band that essentially attaches around your chest, and leveraging the accelerometer that's built into this device, as well as the surface temperature that we can detect and the heart rate, we can provide a person who's monitoring this individual remotely with the key data, with the key characteristics to detect whether this person has influenza, right? Obviously this, the first thing we were thinking about is, okay, quarantine, everybody's gonna be remotely quarantining, so we have to make sure we can monitor them without spreading the virus. So if they're already in quarantine, how do we track these people, right? How do we ensure that an individual, they're checking their temperature or what their breathing is, et cetera, right? But also very quickly and sadly, unfortunately, we realized that one of the key applications of this would be in senior homes and in areas where maybe there isn't a doctor on staff, where you don't have this expensive equipment that you can monitor these individuals. Ergo, we basically started deploying this in senior homes, and basically we're able to remotely monitor what we would call vulnerable populations of folks. But obviously this has applications elsewhere. So with my next chart, given the fact that, that's the cue, Tom, thank you, there we go. A much simplified version of that same thing, again, going back to temperature, is just being able to provide someone with temperature on an ongoing basis, right? So rather than having a constricting, chest band around someone's chest, we came up with a variation of the product, which just gives us temperature and heart rate, right? And this can be worn by school kids, this can be worn by workers in an office. The idea behind this is that you're providing fairly regular and fairly continuous updates of temperature. So if you have someone starting to exhibit an elevated temperature, that person is suspect for having the condition, right? Which means we can take that vector out of the population. We know who they're close to. That's the solution we'll talk about next. And we'll be able to much better be able to sort of isolate these pockets within the population. The sort of seminal use case for this is the Port of Singapore, where the authority for the Port of Singapore has basically mandated that all their workers, there's 8,000 workers, have their temperature taken twice a day, right? Which means that at the very least, you have to do 16,000 readings across all of those individuals, right? This dovetails perfectly for an IoT solution, right? Because if you give everyone a little thing that can wirelessly connect to the network, you can, on an ongoing basis, monitor that entire population of workers inside the port. Now, at this point, I haven't actually talked or mentioned anything about the wireless technology we have in these things. We are actually using LoRa, and there's some very good reasons for why we're using LoRa. Obviously, one of those characteristics is really the battery consumption. So LoRa is extremely battery efficient, which means that we don't need to rely on the individuals to recharge these things on a nightly or on a regular basis. This is especially important when we're dealing with vulnerable populations. Grandma may not remember that she has to recharge this thing on an ongoing basis. And secondly, we get really good range, right? The infrastructure cost is extremely low. You deploy a little LoRa gateway inside of a facility, costs you less than $200. You light up the entire facility. It's much different from, say, Wi-Fi or having to deploy Bluetooth hops along the way. So those are the temperature, those are the monitoring devices, right? So Andy at the beginning talked about measuring and monitoring. So these two devices kind of fall into the category of monitoring and measuring. We have developed another device which helps with a little bit more of enforcement. So next chart, please, Tom. Almost immediately, I would say about April timeframe, every phone manufacturer came up with a contact tracing app, right? Basically, the idea is that you're going to be able to take your cell phone, and if you're in proximity of someone who happens to have COVID, you guys can exchange secure tokens, and there is a big database somewhere in the back that'll inform everyone that you were in contact or you're close to someone. This may sort of work okay. I haven't seen a huge adoption of this, but there are certain organizations which do insist on having the ability to do contact tracing. At Tectelic, we actually went one step further. In addition to providing devices, which I'm holding here, to provide the contact tracing capability, again, these devices speak Bluetooth, they exchange that information between themselves. We've also come up with a way of providing you the actual physical distance that exists between the devices. In other words, if you violate someone's 6-foot radius bubble, or in some organizations that's a 3-foot radius, we can tune it. And if they get within close proximity of each other, they will alert you to that fact. In other words, not everyone knows what 6 feet looks like, right? I mean, unless someone lies down, you don't actually know what 6 feet is, right? This literally trains you to let you know that you are within 6 feet, or as the case may be, within 3 feet of someone. It vibrates and it gives you an audible alert. I turned these off right now, otherwise it would be very annoying because these things would be beeping constantly, right? Again, we're leveraging from a wireless perspective Bluetooth for the near field communication, and for the backhaul, again, we're using LoRa. And again, obviously, battery life is one of the key aspects that we're interested here. So yeah, if I could have my last chart. So you can see from a contact tracing perspective, we have these available in 2 different form factors. I only have the thin distance guard indoor version, the light version. We're also coming out with an ATEX Class 1 Div 2 certified for hazardous locations device that's going to allow us to deploy it in more ruggedized environments, right? Anyway, so in combination, these kinds of solutions we're hoping are going to allow people to, return to work. We're going to have to go back to the workforce. We're going to have to go back to the office. These solutions are just aimed at helping us not eliminate COVID, but at least mitigate in the best way we think is possible. And that's my last chart. So thank you, Tom. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Barney. That was really interesting. A question will open from the audience. How is the respiratory sensor, how is your respiratory sensor, and how does it compare or coexist with the COVID-19 breath analyzer medical device developed by Centec, which is going through
FDA approval?
FDA approval.
Yeah. So, I mean, our device is currently is not going through FDA. We are doing local trials here in Calgary with the local medical community. So we have exemptions for the time being with respect to the testing. In all honesty, I'm not very familiar with the Centec device, so I couldn't give you a point-by-point comparison. I'll have to investigate that and get back to whoever's asking the question.
So you guys make some really interesting devices, and right now you're pointing them at COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic and mitigating risk. Where else can these be repurposed? Well, I mean, I can think of lots of things you might be able to do with respiratory contact tracing type sensors. So what?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the ability to monitor, measure and monitor vulnerable individuals existed before COVID. It's going to exist after COVID, right? I think what's been accelerated from a marketing perspective, the fact is that there may be more avenues for us to deploy the solution, at least with respect to the temperature sensors. With respect to the distance guard solution, because we leverage Bluetooth and LoRa, these devices can be easily repurposed for real-time location tracking services, right? Because they do listen to already existing BLE beacons, you can start using these as panic buttons. For example, there's a button on the bottom here, so you can press as either a check-in button or a panic button, or as very precise finders, I would say, right? So if you have, for example, a Bluetooth asset you're already coded for finding, and you're in the warehouse looking for it, why not have this thing vibrate when you're near it, right? At least, you know where you're gonna be. You're kind of within the right thing. You're within 6 feet. It'll give you an alert that you're almost found it, right? So there's lots of different reapplications of this technology, and we're hoping to get it onto those repurposings as soon as possible, right?
Great. Now, are you seeing any need to combine some of the capabilities of the sensors that you're building? I mean, you think about social distancing. People may want contact tracing and another sensor, whether it's temperature sensor or respiratory sensor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of parameterization, right? I mean, we could take all three of these sensors that I already talked about, right? We have the PIR lens on this, first and foremost, to detect motion, detect people in a particular vicinity, right? So we already know people are present in a particular area. In addition to that, we know that they're socially distancing because they're basically carrying around these devices with them. And last but not least, we can monitor for temperature, right? All it takes is, someone to combine all of these inputs into their specific, flavor of application layer that they're interested in analyzing.
Well, great. We're at our 5 o'clock mark, and we can continue here. I have a few more questions for people, but I wanted to give anybody, let everybody know that we have reached 5 o'clock, but we'll continue asking a few questions. And so getting back to, I'll open this to the group. We had the question about moving lots of data. The audience member is trying to send GPS data every second since they need an RTK fix in their data. So that's one of their concerns about trying to figure out how to use LoRa.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, of course. It's open to the group.
Yeah, so a lot of the LoRaWAN modules that we have been working with can be programmed to work in a dedicated proprietary mode where they work as a radio modem. And in that situation, you don't have to worry about the limitations of the LoRaWAN protocol. You're actually building your own network, and it works like a wireless UART. So data in is data out at the other side. Yeah, Andy probably knows about this, but yeah, that would be one of the solutions I'm thinking of. So that would be one suggestion.
I had, if I may, I've had some customers have a similar request, and when we dug into it, you kind of asked them, do you really need to send, what was it, every second or so that you want? Because sometimes what you could do is you could buffer all the data and then send that as, kind of a chunk of data rather than have, take the handshaking of every single GPS data. Unless you're really trying to do the granular dots on a map, sometimes it's more of a grouping. So think about your use case. Do you really need to send every single data point at that time?
And even if you were to send your data, I mean, a LoRa packet is like 400 milliseconds, right? So you can actually send 2 packets every second within LoRa. So from a capacity perspective, LoRa is more than capable of handling it. My question would be more along the lines of how are you powering your end device, right? Because if it's battery operated and you're transmitting every second, you're going to be replacing those batteries quite often. Maybe you have a solar rig, in which case, you can go nuts. But otherwise, you're not describing a battery powered solution, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about LoRa today, just a lot about LoRa. It keeps coming up, and I get why, because you know we're either out in the farm, and we have sensors that are unattended that can need this miles of range, and in the contact tracing environment, we have the human factor where, as you mentioned, Barney, grandma and grandpa may not be willing or able to charge the device. And so the long battery life is important. But can you talk, I'll open this up again to all the panelists. Can you talk about Cat-M? The carriers all want to talk Cat-M these days. And where and Sigfox seem to be really popular internationally, but less so in the US. In fact, the Sigfox base station for the Silicon Valley is in my house, if you need to know, but it's really comical. But so can anybody want to take that as Cat-M and narrowband IoT, et cetera?
I could speak a little bit to that. As our embedded works side of the house, we do help customers design in those Cat-M and NB-IoT radio level, as we offer the modules. And I think now we can honestly say that Cat-M is 95% deployed here, at least in the US. NB-IoT, probably a little bit of stretch to go, but you know, at the end of the day, what I think is broken is that the carriers have not really differentiated the size or the data plan between what it takes to have a higher bandwidth device like a cell phone and versus a device that you know really hardly takes any bandwidth. So what I would like to see in the industry is that there is a low bandwidth pricing for connectivity versus a medium bandwidth versus a high bandwidth pricing. I think that was something that the carriers need to figure out. And you know, there are rumors of having you know these one bucket price for multi-year, but those rumors have kind of, for me, have been seen overseas. I don't know, you know, fact from fiction. But in the U.S., we haven't gotten to a point where the cost is low enough where it may not be worth it to make bring your own network, you know, technology and power aside. So I think I'd like to see the carriers work on that, having, you know, bite-sized plans that fit the different usage models.
Do you think, Andy, follow up to that question, do you think that 5G helps that?
Well, 5G is another animal beast within itself. It's meant to do sort of very high speeds, bandwidth, and you know, they're now deploying 5G indoors. I think it's just for them. I think I've heard there's a surcharge or upcharge for using 5G. Right now, no one truly has the true 5G as what theoretically we're being touted. But yeah, there might be a day where, you know, there might be, you know, the ultra high pricing plan, which is 5G, and then the 4G pricing, and then the LP-WAN type pricing, if it pertains to NB-IoT and Cat-M.
Gotcha. Well, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. This has been a very informative discussion. As Peter mentioned early on, within 48 hours, we'll make this video and the presentation material available to you. In the meantime, you can go to our website, sign up for any of our shows, sign up for any of the events, volunteer, etc. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Peter to close. I think he wants to give a toast and any final closing comments. So Peter?
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much to the panel, Barney, Renier, and also Andy. We learned a lot about IoT, about COVID, a little bit more, how to protect us from COVID. The question was, when I listened to Renier, why do I need somebody with alcohol on the floor? But yeah, so you are staying at home, you need more alcohol to survive your spouse and your children every day, right? And it has to be good alcohol. With this in mind, I would say Thank you very much again. Thank you very much also to Rio and to Evelyn, who made these wonderful pictures behind us available, and also some other marketing events. The next show will be, like I said, on October 21st. Is already on our website. It will go live on social media tomorrow, latest on Saturday. It's about a life without batteries. Would be nice if you could join again. Until then, in case you have a glass available, say cheers, happy Oktoberfest at home.
Cheers.
And the next one will be Halloween at home. Yeah, with this I end the show. Thank you so much, everybody, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.